At the turn of the 20th century, Native Americans weren't just marginalized, they were literally put on display for crowds at zoos. How did that happen in Cincinnati, Ohio? Let's find out on this week's episode of The Internet Says It's True. Well, hey there, and welcome back to The Internet Says It's True. This is a podcast where we dive into things that sound like I made them up, but they're absolutely true, verifiably, provably, 100% truthy true. I'm Michael Kent. This is a part of the WCBE podcast experience. I'm so glad you're here. This is episode 237. And hey, speaking of the WCBE podcast experience, they have a new app. Just search for WCBE. You'll find their app, and on that app, you can listen to this show, as well as all the other shows that are part of their curated podcast group. Once again, WCBE app, that's available wherever you get apps. Thanks so much for taking the time to tune in this week. We've got a new episode today. It's a bit of a downer, fair warning, but it's important information. And later on, we're going to talk to Grammy-Winning musician and one of my good buddies, Josh Quillen. I chose him for this episode because of all my friends, Josh he's really good at talking about difficult subjects. And he and I know that, we're sort of a safe space when we talk about things that are not easy to talk about. And so I thought that having him on would be a good time. Plus, I haven't had him on since he won a Grammy. So we'll get into that as well. Before we get started with this week's show, just a quick reminder, if you enjoy this podcast, which you're listening, I know you do, there are 3 simple ways you can help support it. Number 1, leave a review and a rating. Go to Apple Podcasts. You search for The Internet Says It's True. Click the 5 stars, but then don't just stop. Type a few words, because when you type a few words, that sort of tricks the algorithm into promoting us more. The rating is great. We've been sitting at a 4.9 for like ever, and we need to get up to a 5, so help me out there. But also leave a few words. It's a big help. Secondly, you can become a Tizitor. If you join the Patreon, that's patreon.com/Michael Kent, just my name. You get ad-free episodes, you get bonus stories, you get Tizitor-only perks like stickers and fun things like that. And you also get 20% off all merch. So that's a lot of fun. Thirdly, merch. Grab the merch at the internetsaysitstrue.com/merch. There are mugs and shirts. It's a great way to show people that you love weird history. Plus, I can attest, I walk around in a t-shirt sometimes that says The Internet Says It's True, and people look at it and they get a chuckle out of that. So if you want people to look at you and chuckle, then buy a t-shirt. Today's episode covers one of the most uncomfortable stories I've ever researched. It's a moment in history that feels more like dystopian fiction than reality, but it happened, and it happened right here in Ohio. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, so-called human zoos were disturbingly common. At world's fairs and expositions, indigenous people were placed into fabricated villages where they lived, worked, and performed for curious white audiences. In 1889, at the Paris Exposition, 400 indigenous people were placed on display. In 1904, the St. Louis World's Fair exhibited entire families from the Philippines in faux goat villages. In 1906, Ota Benga, a Congolese man, was displayed inside the Bronx Zoo's monkey house. Visitors didn't see these human beings as equals. They saw them as exotic attractions, something between science and sideshow. These exhibitions weren't small controversies, they were wildly popular, attracting millions of visitors. And Cincinnati, Ohio was no different. By 1896, the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden was already well established. It had opened in 1875, becoming the second oldest zoo in the U.S. At that time, America was obsessed with the myth of the vanishing Indian, the racist belief that Native Americans were a dying race destined to fade away under the pressure of modernization. Rather than preserve Native cultures with dignity, the attitude was to romanticize them as relics, something to be observed before they disappeared. So when Cincinnati Zoo administrators decided to construct a Native American village exhibit, it didn't raise many eyebrows. They recruited members of various Native nations, primarily Apache and Pueblo, and brought them to Cincinnati to live in a staged encampment for public view. Visitors could stroll past the giraffes and elephants, and then watch real human beings in reconstructed huts and teepees performing daily tasks. Where did these people come from? Well, in 1895, a group of Cree Indians from Montana found themselves stranded in Bellevue, Kentucky after the collapse of a Wild West show. The Cincinnati Zoo offered them a temporary place to stay and work. The Cree signed contracts to live and perform at the zoo, showcasing aspects of their culture to visitors. Zoo director Thane Maynard noted that this was intended as a cultural exhibit, not unlike inviting performers from distant places to share their traditions through performances. These so-called performances included dances, crafting demonstrations, and mock ceremonies, and some were loosely based on real traditions, others were invented by promoters to meet audience expectations. The zoo provided costumes, often inaccurate, blending tribal styles into a cartoon version of native identity. Despite this, the exhibit proved financially successful, generating $25,000 in just 3 months. This success led the zoo to organize a similar event the following year. The following is from an ad in the July 7, 1895 issue of the Cincinnati Enquirer. It says, "If you have not seen the Indians, grasp the fleeting opportunity. If you've seen them, you'll want to see them again. This will positively be the last Sunday that the Cree Indian Village will be at the gardens. The small price of admission charged at the entrance will be used in transporting these waifs of the West back to their homes in far-off Montana. See the chiefs, warriors, squaws, Indian boys and girls, and papooses in their picturesque teepee town. 125 real Cree Indians gorgeous in war paint." In 1896, the zoo hosted 89 Sicangu Sioux from the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. They established a village on the zoo grounds and participated in daily performances intended to educate the public about their way of life. This arrangement was made with approval from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. While the zoo's records described the exhibit as a, quote, incalculable success educationally, it was not financially profitable. Newspapers breathlessly promoted these exhibits, describing them as a, quote, authentic look into a disappearing way of life. In an August 1st edition of the Cincinnati Enquirer, the next year, 1896, I found this passage. It's headlined, "The Custer Massacre." "Tomorrow afternoon at the matinee performance at the Zoological Gardens will occur the initial reproduction of the Custer Massacre, one of the most sensational battles fought on the Western Plains, a conflict in which that hero of the plains, General Custer, and his men went down to death, but not disgraced because they were attacked and overcome by fearful odds. They fought desperately and valiantly to the last. The Custer Massacre was reproduced at the zoo last season with the aid of the Cree Indians, those poor disconsolates who were deserted in this vicinity by unscrupulous showmen, but the Crees were small and insignificant compared with the Sioux Indians now at the zoo. These latter are all splendid specimens of physical manhood, bright and intelligent, and they have a proper conception of what the Custer Massacre was, and it is believed that the production this summer will call forth the sincere and unqualified admiration of all who witness it." End quote. Photos show families posed stiffly in buckskin costumes looking out at crowds who stared back with fascination. No one asked what these individuals thought about being put on display. No one questioned the ethics of treating human lives as entertainment. It's important to note not everyone involved was coerced. For some Native American families, joining these exhibits was a desperate survival strategy. Reservation conditions in the 1890s were absolutely devastating. There were broken treaties, starvation, epidemic diseases, and cultural suppression through forced boarding schools. Facing poverty and limited options, some individuals chose to work in traveling exhibitions and zoo shows. But choice under these conditions is complicated. Economic coercion is still coercion. Participants lived under strict rules, and their movements were controlled. Their earnings were very modest, often swallowed by managers and promoters. And in Cincinnati, as in other cities, once the public lost interest, the people were quietly dismissed, sent back to reservations or into other exploitative touring shows. By today's standards, it's horrifying, but at the time, it was just seen as another attraction, no more controversial than the Elephant House. And Cincinnati wasn't alone. Chicago's 1893 Columbian Exposition hosted massive Indian villages, and Milwaukee's zoo displayed Sioux performers in 1898. Even smaller towns hosted Wild West shows that blurred culture with caricature. The Cincinnati exhibit was part of a national phenomenon, one rooted deeply in colonialist thinking. By 1896, putting humans on display had become big business and hardly anyone questioned it. But what happened after the crowds moved on? And how did America finally reckon with this shameful story? We'll get into that after a quick break. If you love listening to this podcast every week and you want to show your support, that would mean a great deal to me. You can do that by becoming a Patreon member. We've got members at all levels, whether you want to pledge $1 a month or $10 a month. Just think about the value that you receive from this show. And if you like the histories and the stories that you learn about or the jokes that you hear, and if you think that they're worth it, consider signing up. For that, you get every episode ad-free and a week early, access to bonuses like the unedited videos of the guest appearances, and 20% off all merchandise. You can sign up today at patreon.com/Michael Kent. That's patreon.com/Michael Kent. There was a time that humans used 100% organic products as healing balms and moisturizers for their skin. Well, I've partnered with an awesome company that wants to get back to those times. Fatco sells organic and responsibly made tallow-based skincare products. For centuries, humans used tallow in skin moisturizers and healing balms, but unfortunately, the topical application of these fats seemed to stop around the same time that animal fats stopped being considered part of a healthy diet. A lot of modern skincare products do more harm than good by stripping your skin of its natural oils. Let's change that. You can try them out now at fatco.com and get 15% off your order by using my promo code INTERNET. Go to theinternetsaysitstrue.com/deals for the link.
I'm John DeSando, host of Back Talk. This podcast is an extension of the long-running, award-winning movie review show, It's Movie Time. Back Talk features additional content and banter with guests about new movies. If you want more insight and information about what's playing now in theaters and online, find Back Talk at the WCBE Podcast Experience on WCBE.org. You'll be happy you did.
Hey, I'm Cliff Bumgardner.
And I'm Harrison Stewart.
If you're like us, you probably grew up watching the Discovery Channel classic, Mythbusters.
From rocket cars to chicken cannons, Mythbusters proved there's no question too big, too small, or too ridiculous to put to the test.
Now we're going back to rewatch the show from episode 1, and we want you to follow along. Join us as we revisit every single myth, moment, experiment, and explosion from throughout the show's legendary 14 seasons. Subscribe now so you don't miss one.
The Cincinnati Zoo didn't keep detailed records of what happened to the Native Americans it exhibited, but based on patterns from other cities, it's likely they were sent back to struggling reservations or funneled into traveling shows like Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Buffalo Bill's show was a double-edged sword. It paid indigenous performers relatively well compared to reservation work, but it also cemented damaging stereotypes, portraying Native people as either noble savages or bloodthirsty warriors. Those Wild West shows traveled globally. Native performers were sent to Europe, where they performed in front of kings and queens, still playing roles written for them by white promoters. Many died abroad from illness, and others were stranded overseas when shows collapsed financially. In the U.S., when they returned, they found that American society had no place for them except poverty, discrimination, and cultural erasure. The damage didn't end when the exhibits closed. Public exhibitions helped entrench false ideas about Native Americans for generations. Movies picked up these stereotypes. The silent film era often portrayed Native people as either brutal enemies or tragic relics. Westerns reinforced cliches about savage warriors attacking wagon trains. Popular culture stripped away real Native diversity, 500-plus nations, each with their own traditions and histories, and replaced it with a single flattened image. The Cincinnati Zoo's exhibit wasn't just entertainment, it was part of the machinery that erased real Native identity from the American imagination. Today, many institutions that once hosted human exhibits have reckoned with their pasts. The Bronx Zoo formally apologized in 2020 for displaying Otabenga. World's Fair museums have added exhibits about the history of human zoos and racial exploitation. But the Cincinnati Zoo has not made a formal public statement regarding the 1896 Native American exhibit. And there's no official record of public calls for an apology from the zoo itself, but the topic has garnered attention in local media and historical discussions. For instance, a 2014 feature by Cincinnati Public Radio, WVXU, revisited this history, and in a 2021 editor's note, the outlet acknowledged shortcomings in its original reporting, including the use of culturally insensitive language and a lack of indigenous perspectives. They expressed regret for these failings and the harm caused, emphasizing a commitment to transparency and accountability. The Cincinnati Museum Center has also contributed to the conversation by preserving artifacts and photographs from these exhibits, facilitating a more comprehensive understanding of this chapter in the city's ugly history. However, there's no indication that the Cincinnati Zoo has engaged in similar efforts to address or acknowledge this aspect of its past. It remains a quiet, uncomfortable footnote in the zoo's otherwise proud history. And it's not often taught in schools. It's not listed on official timelines. You have to dig to even find it, which makes it all the more important to talk about now. Stories like the Cincinnati Zoo's Native American exhibit force us to confront uncomfortable truths. They show how racism, entertainment, and ignorance intertwine, not centuries ago, but just over 100 years ago. And they remind us that history isn't just about the good parts, it's also about reckoning with the harm we've done, and it's a call to listen more carefully to the voices of Native people today. Voices that, against all odds, never disappeared. The internet says it's true.
Across the U.S., like NPR's Tiny Desk, and with his musical ensemble, soul percussion, and his Caroline Shaw, he just won a Grammy in the chamber music category for their album Rectangles and Circumstance. But perhaps more than all of this, I played the steel pan at my wedding, and he's one of my...
And I marched I-14 in the Ohio State marching band.
He marched next to me when we were old college buddies at Ohio State. Marched next to me, we'd go out in front of 109,000 people and just be out there playing our drums and talking to each other on the field.
I won a Grammy, but still to this day, the best audience I've ever played for was Columbus, Ohio, every Saturday. That was kind of one of the most insane things I've ever had.
Yeah. And, my stepmom said something to me the other day. She's like, Michael, you've done a lot of stuff. And I think the same can be said for you, John. You've done a lot of stuff. You've toured all over the world with soul percussion. I mean, literally, how many countries are you up to now?
I haven't done a count. I used to have a map with the pins in it, and then we moved out of that space. And I don't know where the map and all the pins went, but I was just saying to somebody the other day that growing up in a very small town in Ohio, I remember leaving it for the first time and traveling somewhere and being like, "What is this world?" Like,
Yeah.
and and both in good, complicated, both in good ways and in complicated ways. It was scary, but part of my job now is like I get sent to like Russia, and I've been to Ukraine, I've been to Scotland and Australia and Latvia and Lithuania and Germany, and like just these places I never would have gotten to go otherwise. And so, yes, the Grammy's great, but actually the biggest payoff to doing my job so far in these 20 years has been just getting to participate in other cultures, other food, other drink, like all over the
Sure.
world, everybody sort of has figured out a way to be alive for another day, and I
Yeah.
just love seeing how everybody's figured it out differently,
I love it. I love it. So I have a new segment that's new since last time you were on the show where I ask guests to give me a fact that they think maybe I haven't heard about. Can you tell me a true fact that you think there's little chance I know?
Yeah, so I have been sort of for a while, probably last 5 or 6 years, been really interested in uh, the history of Europe, but also the history of Weimar Germany, and not even Weimar, like Germany pre, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, like everything leading up to World War One through World War Two. And I was watching this documentary the other day about a place called El Dorado, which is a was a place for what was called at the time transvestites. Now I think we would maybe call them transgender or cross-dressing, stuff like that. It was a very complicated sort of like set of clubs in Berlin, Germany. prior to the Nazis coming and taking it over. Like this was like 1921, I think, through the early 30s, prior to like the rise of the Nazi regime. But it was like one of the most bustling areas for that particular type of nightlife. Also known as the place, not the El Dorado wasn't the place where it happened, but Berlin, Germany is where the very first transgender surgery happened.
Oh.
1921, I believe her last name was Richter, and the doctor was something. I remember his name off the top of my head. I'm absolutely blanking. But anyway, just to say, like it's just in terms of the global scale of like history and the way that we talk about progress and care for others, like all of these things, like it is just ironic to me that Berlin, Germany, prior to the Nazis taking over, was where the first sort of medical procedures around gender affirming care took place. So
I did not know that. That is a winning answer. And I have to say, this comes up, a lot where people say they have this idea that this is a new thing, the idea of trans individuals. And not only is it not new, I mean, it's been in every civilization there have been trans people, and trans people were some of the first groups of people that the Nazis went after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely, usually when authoritarian regimes or dictatorial regimes come into power, the places they affect most or the places they go to first are the places in society that are usually going to stand up and be like, hey, that's not cool. Yeah. And that involves folks who are on, the gender spectrum somewhere, that is gay, lesbian, transgender. That involves professors. That involves the clergy. Sort of. So how that all ties in with what's going on today, I feel is a little more prescient than I'd like it to be. But
Sure. Well, let's get into this week's quiz, and we'll talk a little bit more here in a bit. But for question 1, we're going to play for a joke. So if you get it wrong, you have to tell me a joke. If you get it right, I will tell you one. And this topic doesn't lend itself to jokes. And so you're just going to have to understand that Josh and I are really good at talking about difficult stuff, especially Josh. He's really good at talking about difficult stuff. We're not doing any of this in light. We are very present about what is going on here. So, but he doesn't even know what this topic's about yet. So here's your question, Josh. What exhibit did the Cincinnati Zoo promote in 1896? Was it A, the last remaining dodo bird, B, dogs that they called wolves, they told people they were wolves, or C, a Native American village complete with indigenous people? One of these is true. One of them, Cincinnati had this on display in their zoo.
I'm going to say that a complete Native American village with indigenous people.
You are correct, sadly.
Sadly, I'm correct, but
in 1895 and 1896, the Cincinnati Zoo had a staged Native American village as an attraction. Individuals were exhibited and displayed for paying visitors. Now, that was a larger trend of human displays during that era, and there's no public controversy back then because they just did that. And the World's Fair had it. The Bronx Zoo had it. It was just a thing that happened. So, pretty gross thing that happened. And what's really interesting about this whole thing is that you can look with the hindsight now, right, of knowing that it was wrong. They didn't necessarily think of it as wrong back then because everyone was more colonial minded. But we look at it now, and you can read in newspapers how they sort of justified it for themselves. And what they would say is things like, well, this is a dying people that isn't able to live in modern society, so we're helping them. They had this idea of like the savior thing where it's like, we're helping these people, not exploiting them. Right. Kind of gross.
Yeah, it's definitely more than kind of gross, but also I think I've always been someone who's tried to not judge the past with the current moralities of the present, because that is not fair. And I say that not like, of course, like it's gross. All of those things you said are true, but it's also very lazy for me to be like, well, we think this now. Why didn't they think that then? It's like, well,
Well, and the reason they thought it, though, because I'm sure that they thought it. I'm sure that thought entered their mind at some point, but then they were able to justify it with the cultural trends of the time, which was largely based on lies. The lie that the Native American is disappearing not because we made them disappear, but because they're not compatible with modern society. And
Right.
it's this whole, white savior thing that happens anytime there's colonialism. It's basically what happened. And
Right.
yeah, that's a real thing. I did find a joke. I purposely, so I've got these old joke books, and I'm sure there are dozens and dozens of pages in these joke books about Native Americans. We're not reading one of those. I found a joke about a zoo. Here's the joke. I went to a zoo and it only had one exhibit, a dog. It was a Shih Tzu.
Yeah. I really hope I get all these questions right because I'm terrible. I've always been terrible at telling jokes, Mike.
Well, that's the only joke stakes. All the other ones are different stakes. Like, for example, you and I have a lot of stories from college. Did we go to school for 2 years together or one? 2 years.
My freshman and sophomore year, 98, 99.
Yeah, and we hung out a lot. We partied a lot, and we have some stories, some things that happened. And for this question, we're playing for an embarrassing story from college.
Okay, great.
So, and I've got
All right, great.
I've got a bunch. So here is your question. What law was it that granted all Native Americans born in the U.S. full citizenship rights? Was it the A, Indian Removal Act, B, Indian Citizenship Act, or C, the Dawes Act, D-A-W-E-S? So it was either Indian Removal Act, Indian Citizenship Act, or Dawes Act.
I'm going to admit, embarrassingly, that I don't know this history as well as I should, but I'm going to say the Dawes Act.
It is the Indian Citizenship Act.
It seemed just a little too on the nose for me. I didn't.
Yeah. Now, the Dawes Act aimed to divide tribal lands into individual allotments to try to assimilate them into society and get them to do like white people stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The Indian Citizenship Act finally recognized Native Americans as full U.S. citizens. This was a right that many had been denied even after serving in the military. They were paying taxes and still not citizens at that point. So it was long overdue. Let's see. When was the Indian Citizenship Act? I'm curious. Indian Citizenship, 1924. So, yeah. 1924 sounds like a long time ago. It's really not.
Oh, it's like
It's 100 years ago.
like a person ago.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's one
A little
grandpa
over
ago.
one person ago.
Yeah.
I read it. There's this really interesting book called "Bury the Chains" that's about the history of the ending of the British slave trade and sort of the advocacy that went into sort of ending that over like the course of like 40 years.
Yeah.
And the author his name's Adam Hawkschild, and he really talks a lot about thinking of history in terms of days, not years. So if you think of like slavery ending 55,000 days ago, it's all of a sudden like, oh my God, that's so close.
I like your metric, which is how many people ago, because that makes it real. Like when you look at civil rights and the girl on the steps of the school, what was that? What was her name? Ruby Freeman? No,
I don't know her last name. Ruby sounds right. But.
Yeah, let me look. Did I say that right?
Yeah, there are people still alive now.
No, Ruby Freeman is a Georgia election worker. That means I have to delete this part of the thing.
But leave it in. It's all right, buddy. Just cop to it. It's fine.
That's bad. I know. I got it.
All right for Joe Rogan. Got to be okay for you.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's Ruby Bridges.
Okay, well, you had the first half. Ruby's fine, but more than I have.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, she desegregated an all-white school.
Yeah.
Those people the white people that are angry in those photos are still with us.
Right.
Like those are people's great grandmas.
I think that is good. Thinking of it in terms of people is good in terms of realizing that like a lifetime is actually shorter than you think.
Yeah.
But the day thing sort of helps you realize that like history doesn't change in years. It changes every day. Like every day there are decisions being made. Like, for example, the thing I learned about that from that book was the like medical hesitancy in the African American community. Why would that? We talked a lot about that during COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Slavery was ended in 1865 in the United States. The British slave trade over the course of the early 1800s, around 1838, late 1830s. Do you think that like whenever it was officially ended, they got the letter, the doctors were like, "Whoa, come on in. That was crazy, right?" Like, no. The next day was no different than the day before.
Right.
And then the day after that was probably no different than the prior 300 years, 400 years. And then it was only until somebody started showing up into town and being like, "Hey, you're not doing the thing we said you should be doing."
Yeah.
It's like this stuff leaks through time day by day.
It's
Sort of-
also a little bit of the frog in the boiling pot of water analogy.
Absolutely.
You know,
I mean,
and it's kind of always there. We're definitely seeing it right now happen, where, you know, rights erode away, and they happen so slowly, or it seems like such a part of a cycle and not a part of a continuity that we're like, oh well, it's not going to be, it's going to be fine, you know. And really, you look back and you're like, well, things are very different than they were 2 years ago, you know.
yeah.
even,
I mean,
so.
but because somebody today at 9 a.m. Unlocked the office to their door and made a decision about cutting X, Y, and Z department from the government, and it's like that wasn't the case yesterday. So again, in terms of like history, if history was written yesterday, it wouldn't include the decisions that are made today, and sort of seeing how those all add up.
Right.
You know. Anyway, it's very interesting to me. I totally derailed us there, buddy. You need an embarrassing story.
No, I need an embarrassing story. Okay.
Okay, well, this involves you, Mike.
Oh boy.
Well, actually, hold on a second. Let me think if I've got a better one that doesn't.
Well,
No, I think it's been.
Yeah, it's probably good. It's probably appropriate to tell.
I would say there's a thing that comes up. I don't even know if this is an embarrassing story. It's just embarrassing that at one point in my life I thought this was a rational thing to do with you. But me and my friend Jason Little, because I had transferred to the University of Akron after my sophomore year. Except we hadn't remained close friends, and we would hang out a couple times a year. Me and my buddy Jason, and I think Jeff Knightsky, who was another good friend of mine, came down to Columbus because you were doing magic show, or we played a steel drum gig at your magic show. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, something.
But you were like, hey, bro, let's go on a tour de Franzia. And I was like, what is that? And next thing I know, like, there are still photos that show up there, and thankfully they're not digitized. They're only hard copies, but there's photos of me wearing my marching band hat with like a box of Franzia on my shoulder. That's that's the story. It's not. I don't know if that's embarrassing to you or to me, but just the like when people talk about like toxic masculinity, I don't think we should call it toxic. It's just like stupid masculine. Like no one got hurt. It's just I walk around town with a box of Franzia on my shoulder wearing a marching band hat. So
yeah, we need a word that goes with masculinity, and the first word has to be something that just means annoying, but maybe with some alliteration.
Off-putting masculinity.
Off-putting masculinity is probably a good one.
There's levels to the game.
I really like how you put that, because no, I don't think that I actually hurt anyone, but other than just, you know, maybe by being annoying. But when you're in college and it's your first time sort of discovering who you are, you act stupid sometimes.
I mean, they sell wine by the square foot, by the cubic foot. That's crazy.
I thought that a box of wine, Franzia back then, I thought it was the most genius idea, because I could walk to a house party with it on, like, just carrying, it had a handle, and I could like walk to a house party with it, you know, close the spout. Now it's not an open container. It's a closed spout. And also I would be like, I would be at the party and be the most popular person at the party, because I would say, hey, you want to hit my box? And then I would just hold it up in the air and open the spout for someone into their mouth. And people would get a little shot of wine, and there's still plenty left for Michael Kent at the end of the day.
I think that the tour is it Tours de Franzia or Tour de Franzias?
I don't know French, so I don't know. I think
Tours de Franzia
pluralization.
Okay. Took a hit during COVID. There's just the pouring wine into other people's mouths, sort of.
Yeah, everyone has to have their own spout.
All right, that's my,
to the bottom of.
That's my story.
We one time had an ice luge. Do you remember the ice luge party? Were you there for that? It was like a giant block of ice that somehow we affixed to the handrails on our back steps, and we put like a colored light underneath it, and then we would it had like a channel carved in the top of it, and you would just like pour shots of vodka down there. And we didn't do the whole mouthpiece thing. You just put your mouth on the ice where everyone else's mouth was.
Because at the time it was like, well, the ice kills all the germs. It's like, no, what the ice is doing is freezing all the germs and preserving them, so that when they go in your mouth with the vodka,
the germs melt off.
They're
drop
perfectly preserved
steps
and regerminate in your belly.
All right, we need to get back to the show.
Yeah, let's continue.
For question 3, we're going to play for a sticker. It's 3 inches, it's square, and it's sticky, and it says the internet says it's true, and you can put it on, you know, the flagpoles and and street poles or whatever around your
And if
hometown.
you win, I will give you my diamond medallion Delta luggage.
That's better. I'll trade you my platinum for your diamond.
All right. Good.
Did you get the new metal ones?
Yeah, oh yeah, dude.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, when you get status on Delta, they're doing a promotion right now where you can sign up and get like permanent metal tags with your names on them. And, you have to sign up for them or whatever. And I thought it was great until I put it on my bag. And now when I walk around, my bag's like ting, ting. It's like so loud.
They want you to know. It's a free cowbell that comes with
exactly. Yeah, well, there goes a Delta passenger. All right. Which World's Fair famously displayed entire villages of indigenous people, including Filipinos and Native Americans? Was it A, the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, B, 1893 Chicago World's Fair, or C, the 1910 Brussels World's Fair?
I'm going to say Chicago. I don't know why my instincts went there so fast, but I feel bad if I'm wrong in defense of all Chicagoans.
I mean, no, you're wrong. Hang on. I hit the wrong button. It's wrong. I hit the winner button. It should have been the loser button. Because I thought it was Chicago, too, 1893 Chicago World's Fair. I thought I had read about that, and it may have been. So I'm going to give you half credit on this because we might both be wrong. It was the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. They featured staged villages where indigenous people were exhibited as living displays, as, primitive cultures in quotation marks. And it was one of the most infamous examples of human exhibitions in American history. So,
yeah.
The 1904 World's Fair was crazy, by the way. I did an episode about the 1904 World's Fair, about the marathon that they ran. And it was nuts. I don't even remember all the weird stuff, but go back and listen for that episode, 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. There's just crazy examples of that World's Fair because it combined the Olympics with the World's Fair in the same city.
Can I just say that I think I kind of miss the concept of the World's Fair? I mean, I think the internet has replaced that because now, like, it was a place we all agreed whether it was going to be London or St. Louis or Chicago. Like, everybody in the world was like, all right, we're going to get together and show everybody the crazy shit we've been working on, And it's a place where you demonstrated the new combustion motor you were building or the whatever. And there are and where I came across or where I interface with the World's Fairs historically the most is in music.
Mm-hmm.
Steel band, one of the very first things that at post World War II, one of the very first sort of exports from Trinidad, aside from oil and other things, was music. And there was a band called the Trinidad All Steel Percussion Orchestra. It wasn't called a steel band at the time. They were groups of musicians, and they went and performed at the World's Fair in London, I think in 1950 or 51. I can never remember. One of those 2 years.
Yeah.
But it's like that is where the world first heard. It was the first sort of like internet download of music from another culture as far as steel drum is concerned. But like Debussy, he wrote for these things called omglocken, which are these little pitched metal discs that not omglocken, crotale, excuse me. When you hit them, they go ding, and they resonate.
It's like a beautiful bell.
Right. But it's just a pitched, he called them antique cymbals because I think in other cultures, whether it be Turkey or and again, like I'm ignorant as to what exact culture he got these from, but he just saw somebody clanging these two cymbals together. And so he wrote from like in a piece called La Mer, there's these crotale notes. I think it's La Mer that has these really light, beautiful dings at the end. It's only because he was at the World's Fair and was like, what is that? Like, and I kind of love, it's
a snapshot from time, from history.
Yeah. And again, like I'm not endorsing putting up exhibits of indigenous cultures, but
yeah.
I do miss the one thing the internet doesn't give you is the smell of a combustion engine that is like new, And so like one of the things you can't get, that you could only get by going to a World's Fair was like being around all of these people and seeing this stuff in real time,
We've done a few episodes that have revolved around the World's Fair. One of them that was really interesting was the idea of why are pencils yellow? And they're only yellow because at the World's Fair, and I believe it was the Paris World's Fair, Dixon Ticonderoga Company came out with a pencil that they decided it was going to be yellow because in China, yellow was a symbol of good fortune and wealth and royalty. And it was a way to disguise, the wood, which might have had imperfections in it. So,
amazing.
But yeah, there's some really, really great. We have a few. I can't remember. There were 2 or 3 really great stories about the World's Fair that we've done in the past. Okay, so we should move on. You get half a sticker, we'll say, for that. Because I have to look at the Chicago World's Fair and see if they did something like this. I feel like you may be right. They may have done that.
Again, it wasn't a comment on Chicago. It was more of a comment on the date that you sent.
Yeah. Well, we've done 3 questions, and you've gotten 1.5 right. So
All right.
you're batting 500. For question 4, we're playing for your Grammy Award, your physical Grammy Award.
Okay.
So if you get it wrong, you have to mail your Grammy to me.
Well, I don't have it yet, so that's, when I get it, I'll send it to you.
When you get it. The asterisks on this one is only if you want to. So if you want to keep your Grammy, you don't have to give it to me. But
I consider the Grammy like the Stanley Cup. Like, it just travels around to different friends of mine. You can drink out of it. You can do whatever. Make some oatmeal in it, whatever you do.
I love it. I like how when you see people drinking from the Stanley Cup, I'm like, you realize that 700 people put their baby in that yesterday? They had it on display at the local hocky rink, and everyone put their baby in it. It's
been blessed by the Pope, so like it's like drinking out of the chalice at church, like everyone's fine with
it. In 2020, that's just 5 years ago, which U.S. zoo formally apologized for its role in displaying a human being in an animal exhibit? Was it A, Cincinnati, B, San Diego, or C, the Bronx?
I don't know why the Bronx just made me laugh. It seems like something the Bronx would do, but I'm going to go with Cincinnati.
The answer, boogie down, the Bronx. It was the Bronx. Theirs was particularly egregious. This was 1906. They had a man, it was Congolese. His name was Oda Benga.
Okay.
And they had him in the zoo's monkey house as part of this racist, dehumanizing display. And then so
alive or dead?
Alive. He lived in there. A century later, they finally came to reckon with these past injustices, and they issued an apology. And one of the things that I found in the story that I couldn't decide whether I wanted it in the episode or not was, so they released Oda Benga after a while. He was no longer on display, and sadly, he took his own life. Right. And the way that they described that was sort of, remember Brooks from Shawshank Redemption, how he couldn't live on the outside because he had been institutionalized? That's why they said Oda Benga took his life at the end. They said, well, it was because he didn't know how to live in modern society and he couldn't adjust. Not, we spent the last decade or however long, displaying him as in a monkey exhibit. You know what I mean? Like dehumanizing the man.
Spent the last decade acclimating him to this environment so that he couldn't live elsewhere.
This was his only. So it was kind of a gross piece of history, but the Bronx did apologize. Sadly, and something that I'm considering starting a petition for after doing this. The Cincinnati Zoo has never apologized for their portrayal of Native American villages. So possibly, and I'll let my readers maybe decide, or my listeners maybe decide if should we start a petition to ask Cincinnati to apologize? Because listen, the Bronx Zoo did it 100 years later. 100 years later. So we can do that in Cincinnati. It was 1896. It's 2025. It's never too late. Let's apologize. What's the big deal?
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I would also, I would love to sort of compromise here. They have been cursed with the Bengals.
Well, yes, but also Harambe. Harambe happened at the Cincinnati Zoo.
Oh my, okay, all right. Well, then they got the Reds too, so it's not like they're out of the woods.
Yeah. They maybe
I'm with you, Mike. I agree. They should apologize.
I wonder why they chose the Bengals as that's an episode. Why did they choose the Bengals as a mascot in a country where Bengal tigers do not exist?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it has something to do with the Cincinnati Zoo.
Let's look. Bengals name history.
They're like, we've got all the Bengals in the world, so that's why we should be called the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay.
All 4 of them right here.
It was because the original Cincinnati Bengals founder, Hal Pennington, chose the name after a Bengal stove in his mother's kitchen. So his mom had a kitchen with a stove made by the Bengal Company. And so now we need to find out why the Bengal Stove Company chose that.
I think we could stop. I'm not doing any more research right now, Mike. Yeah. We're moving on.
This is what I do. I go down these rabbit holes and they just don't end. Luckily, we've come to the final question, Josh. And if you get this one right, you're welcome back on the show. If you get it wrong, never allowed back ever again.
Okay, fair enough.
Here's your question. What's the best way to learn about a culture other than your own?
The answer that comes to mind very quickly is to go there.
I first of all, that's a right answer. And second of all, I like that this was what you started with before we ever got into this podcast's topic. Do you remember earlier, maybe like 25 minutes ago, when you came on, you talked about all the places you've gotten to see and how you came to appreciate these cultures just because you went there. And
there's a real discussion happening, and I'm not looking to tread into any sort of truly controversial topics with you here because it's not. I've never been to some of these places, but
sure.
There's an argument happening right now, I think, in society about expertise and how we value that. What value we put on someone who spent a lot of time doing X, Y, and Z. Like if my plumbing breaks tomorrow, Mike, I'm sorry. With all due respect, I'm not calling you.
Okay. Fair.
I love you, but you don't know shit about my plumbing. You never have, and you never will.
I've installed, Josh, 4 sump pumps and 3 garbage disposals.
And that's fine. But there are people who have installed thousands. So I'm going to call them.
No. But listen, I'm the RFK Jr. of plumbing. I figured out what no one else knows, and that is if you use cardboard tubes instead of PVC.
All right. So maybe plumbing was
the PFAs. What's that?
So maybe plumbing was a bad example. Anyway, point being is that there's a guy named Douglas Murray who was arguing against a comedian about sort of pontificating about things that you don't know about, and then when someone challenges you, being like, "Well, I'm just a comedian." It's like, well,
yes.
Hold up a second. Like,
yes, this is the Joe Rogan thing, and I know that you listen to Joe Rogan.
I haven't listened to Joe Rogan in years, and not because
I thought you did.
Not because I don't think people shouldn't listen to him. Like,
sure.
But
he refuses to understand the gravitas that he has on people.
Well, that and the blind spot of like, if I went on to your podcast and started talking to you about the nuances of distraction and card manipulation, and I started being like, well, no, that's not how it's done. Like, there's a point at which you're going to be like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Sure. And
just because you're my friend, I'm the friend of a musician. That doesn't mean that I know what I'm talking. Like, so anyway, point being, to answer your question, I don't think it makes you an expert, but I think what it does is it shuts your mouth really fast. I think going to another place, going to places like Trinidad and Tobago, going to places in Brooklyn where it's largely of a Caribbean diaspora, diasporic population. It's not that I know more than they do by any means, but I just got there's a lot of stuff that's sort of like, oh.
Yeah.
And then you hear something that you don't agree with. You hear somebody say something about your culture that maybe is wrong or is misplaced, and you're like, well, maybe now's not the time to speak up. Maybe this isn't the place to speak. Like, all of the nuances that come into play, and this goes for whether I'm in a Caribbean panyard or whether I'm in Lithuania, Vilnius, Lithuania, with a presenter, who's talking about issues that are dealing with their life. It's like, oh, I thought I knew this about X, Y, and Z in terms of your relations with Russia and the Baltic states. Oh, like, oh, this is why you think the way you do about curry seasoning, like, oh, like,
yeah.
I don't think it makes you an expert. I think what it does is it actually keeps you from getting in arguments with people really fast because you realize how little you know.
Sure.
And it helps you sort of step back and be like, and just sort of spot the bullshitters. And what my takeaway from the Douglas Murray and Joe Rogan thing wasn't that I think Joe Rogan should stop his podcast. Not at all. It's that I think more people should be like, that guy's not an expert. Y'all know that, right? Like, or that guy's not a magician. You know that, right? Like, I learned one way to distract people. I learned to hide one red spongy ball, and now I'm the guy getting all the gigs. But I'm just a musician.
Right.
Like that argument, I think, is starting to lose a little bit of sway. And I think I agree with Douglas in the sense that like, I'm sorry, like there's a level that I'm not going to go in with you because you've never smelled the air there. You don't know what you don't actually know what the concerns are of the people there. So yes, I think going to a place is travel is the silver bullet to bigotry and hatred and misogyny and all of the things.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's a correct answer. So you're welcome back. And we've got to wrap up. But real quick, if you want to learn about Josh, go to joshquillen.com. You can learn all about his projects. You can listen to the things he's done. You can listen to his Concert Honesty podcast episodes. And we've had some good discussions on there. But you've also got a show coming up in your hometown of Dover, correct?
I do. I am going to Dover, Ohio in June, actually, for 2 weeks to work with can I just say, it's not to go back, not to bring up the Grammy, but if I don't mind if I do.
Please do.
The best part about winning a Grammy was twofold. One, telling my mother.
Yeah.
Like the $90 splash cymbal she bought me in high school, like is now all worth it. But also telling my 5th grade drum teacher. And I'm going, Joan Wenzel is her name, and she's who started me in percussion, but also in the steel band world. She's who got me turned on to all of that. Calling her and telling her was like the best feeling in the world. Like, honest to God, somebody gives me $400,000, or they can say, call Joan Wenzel and tell her about you. Call Joan every day. Like, that was such a good
Imagine how she felt getting that call and like hanging up the phone afterward. Imagine how she felt. Like, she probably just sat back in her chair and was like, that's probably all she wanted in life, was to hear that her students were successful. Well, and it doesn't get much more successful in music than winning a Grammy.
I don't want to presume that her thoughts are also that surfacey. Like, I'm sure she has a lot of like really like, I don't want to assume that that's the meaning to her life, but just expressing to her my gratitude.
Sure.
Being like, Joan, and truthfully, it's like, you win a Grammy, nothing changes in your life. I'm here to tell everybody, all of your listeners,
that's not true. You are now Grammy winner Josh Quillen, and
right. But in terms of history being made day to day,
no,
my inbox was the same today as it was yesterday. And I just want to say that like the best part about it is being able to go back and give back to the people who gave so much to me. So I'm going to in June. I'm going to teach them some percussion ensemble pieces, do some John Cage, sort of show them all the weird stuff that I've been grateful to be involved in, but also do some steel drum stuff. Then I'm going to perform with her and the students at the end of that week. So I can't wait. It's kind of my favorite gig of the year, actually, going back and working with a bunch of like 5th through like 6th graders. And
absolutely. Well, I hope when you're in Ohio, we get a chance to hang out and maybe get some Franzia together.
I will pre-order no less than 6 boxes of Franzia's finest Sangiovese, and we will paint the town with it.
The tour part 2. All right, man. It's so good to see you. Thank you for making time for the podcast today.
Anytime, buddy. Love you, man.
That's it for this week. Thank you so much to Josh Quillen for being my guest, and thanks to you for listening. Here's the voice of a kid who grew up in a world where children never played cowboys and Indians.
Thank you for listening to The Internet Says It's True. To listen to episodes ad-free and a week early, support us on Patreon. You can do that at patreon.com/Michael Kent. If you learned something just now that you didn't already know, go to the Apple Podcast app and leave us a review with 5 stars and a few words. That helps us a ton, because that's how the algorithm works. I don't know what an algorithm is, but just do it. See you next week for a brand new episode of The Internet Says It's True!
The Internet Says It's True would like to thank the Patreon subscribers whose monthly contributions help to make this show possible. Sean Brown, Joshua Endress, Dallas Ray, Bryce Swanson, Eugene Anderson, Jim and Joanne Martin, Mitch and Andrew Joseph Kemplin, and the show's official Emperor, Kick Track. The show is written and produced by me, Michael Kent. The theme song is by Finite Music Forge, and all audio clips in this episode are used for education and commentary and used under Fair Use Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107. You can listen to past episodes by searching for The Internet Says It's True wherever you get your podcasts, and you can see bonus content at patreon.com/Michael Kent.